This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen. Content presented on the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent views of the Whole Care Network. Always consult your physician for medical and fitness advice, and always consult your attorney for legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Have you ever met anybody that has caregiving on their bucket list of things to do in life?
Beyond caregiving, how do we care?
We also have to care for ourselves.
How do we treat friends, family, strangers we meet?
Forget it.
How do we heal? The physical, social, financial, spiritual.
Hello.
By creating healing ties. Tying it all together like a bow tie. With your host, Christopher McClellan, the bow tie guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is Christopher McClellan. You know me as the bow tie guy, and welcome to another episode of Healing Ties 2.0 featured on the Whole Care Network. And on the Whole Care Network, we are all about stories and resources because we believe it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And our common cause is supporting caregivers before, during, and after caregiving ends. And as you know, we're celebrating National Family Caregivers Month with the reboot of the popular Healing Ties podcast. Well, I think it's popular, and I hope my guest does too, with our 30 podcasts in 30 days and the soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website. So when you get a chance, please visit our new website at thewholecarenetwork.com. Well, you got to go to the old site to get to the new site. You'll see the link. It's right there in the front. And then when you get to the new site, you'll get the opportunity to meet Bo, because Bo ties things together on the Whole Care Network. And when you see Bo, you're going to get it 100%. I know you will. During our soft launch, we'll be asking our listeners to provide us with feedback on the new site so we can continue to build our site where you can easily find your favorite podcasts, favorite blogs, and videos. Oh, and by the way, you'll be able to search our content on the Whole Care Network via our 4 pillars of care: our physical, social, financial, and spiritual health. All content will be categorized in one or all 4 of those categories. Well, enough from me. My guest on this episode of Healing Ties is the executive director of the Tennessee Respite Coalition. Dr. Schwalm holds a PhD in educational policy and leadership from the University of Iowa and has worked as a diversity consultant and trainer for over a decade. Dr. Schwalm has served as executive director for 2 nonprofits, both focused on serving clients with disabilities, and has served as a community organizer for Understood.org and the National Center for Learning Disabilities. And Dr. Schwalm, well, Megan, welcome to Healing Ties. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
How did that? You went from Iowa to Nashville. That's quite an exciting move.
It was. I got tired of winter and decided it was time for a change.
And Nashville's such an up and growing city. It's goodness. And I'm originally from St. Louis, so I've been into Nashville a few times. But enough of this. I'd like to know a little bit more about what the work that you're doing, because you're providing tremendous amount of respite care for the citizens in Nashville.
So we serve caregivers across the state of Tennessee, providing caregivers with respite so that they can have a break from caregiving duties. As we know, there are 53 million caregivers
Right.
across the country. Over 60% of those are working professionals. And 21% of those caregivers report that their health is poor because of caregiving. And so there's a desperate need for help for caregivers across the state and across the country. And so we provide respite vouchers where we reimburse folks for money that they spend on respite care so that they can take a break.
Respite care, I've always have said this, there's three things that caregivers need. They need validation because it is hard. And we need validation, especially from one caregiver to another. We need resources, and the most trusted resources are usually from one caregiver to another. And we need respite because we have to re-energize and refuel our body. And this is a tremendous opportunity for caregivers to be able to take some time and care for themselves, because that's job number one for all caregivers is self-care.
Absolutely. We always say you can't pour from an empty cup. So we, as caregivers, we really, really have to care for ourselves. I am a caregiver. I have a son with disabilities, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that respite really sort of saved our family during some of the hard periods that we went through with him. And I moved to Tennessee from Iowa, and Iowa has a lot more services provided through the state. And so I was able to get a lot of respite there. But when I moved to Tennessee, there aren't a lot of options through Medicaid for respite. And so went a while before I actually found the Tennessee Respite Coalition once I moved here and was able to get services from them. And then this job opened up. So here I am.
Isn't it amazing how things just kind of happen because they're supposed to?
Yeah. I'm really passionate about respite. And when I moved here, I started asking folks, where do you get respite in this state? And it took 9 months before someone told me about the Tennessee Respite Coalition. And then when the job opened up, I had two different friends get in touch with me and say, hey, this job is open and you are crazy about respite. So you really should get in touch with them. So
perfect fit.
Yeah.
Perfect fit. So walk me through the process if I was to call your agency today.
If you were to call our agency today, we would ask for some information to make sure that you qualify as a caregiver. So we need to know that you are living with the person you're caring for. To qualify for our funding, you have to be living with the person you're caring for.
Okay.
Though we know that caregivers also provide care remotely and need support, but because of our funding, you have to be living in the same home and the person you're caring for has to have some diagnosis. And then our program assistant would do an intake and collect all of your information. And then you go on a waiting list until we have a spot open for you. And that varies. Sometimes it can take a while. Sometimes we can get you in right away. We have multiple funding sources and they all have different stipulations. So depending on your income, the disability of the person you're caring for, a variety of things, there may be an opening for you, or you might have to wait on a wait list. And then once we have a spot for you, we provide you with some voucher forms. And you then find a respite provider, and we can give people some helpful suggestions about where to find a respite provider. But the thing I love about this voucher program is that it gives caregivers the more power over getting respite.
Right.
In most states across the country, respite comes through the Medicaid system. So there are lots of stipulations about who can provide respite, what training they need to have, and how much they get paid. And as a caregiver myself, when I lived somewhere where my respite came through the Medicaid system, it was often very frustrating because there's so much turnover in those positions. And, there was often not a lot of reliability with the folks that were caring for my son. So our program gives the caregiver the opportunity to choose their own care provider. Our only stipulation is that they can't have a felony. So we do a background check to make sure they don't have. But other than that, if you have a neighbor who's willing to watch your loved one for $5 an hour, you can stretch that respite voucher of $600 pretty far. So you determine the rate and you can pick anyone you want. And for me, and I think most of our caregivers, there's some relief in that. You can pick someone I can pick someone who knows my child and who is ready for his behaviors and knows what to expect. Whereas often we'd get a respite provider sent from the state that, would come one time and never come back again because they didn't know what they were getting themselves into.
Yeah, there's a few stories about that, I think, all across the country.
So our program really gives power back to the caregivers.
What I like about this is just what you said about power to the caregivers, and they can select their own member of their care team and pay them.
Yes.
I think this is ingenious.
There are some other states across the country who are doing similar things as us, and we do consulting with other agencies across the country to help them get programs like ours going.
We just did a podcast just the other day with the Dementia Spotlight Foundation, and they do respite care for in 4 or 5 counties in Florida and a couple of counties in Georgia. I need to connect the two of you because
that would be wonderful.
But because it is such a need, and when the caregiver has the ability to select who's coming in, there's instant comfort.
Yes, absolutely.
How's COVID impacting the program?
COVID has significantly impacted our program. We have seen over 60% decrease in voucher usage since the pandemic has started. But we have worked really hard to provide new services during the pandemic. So when it started, we sent a survey out to all of our caregivers and collected data to see how they were being impacted by the pandemic and also what things they felt would help them during the pandemic. And then we also looked at some national and international resources and research that was going on to see, what are best practices, what can we do? And so we implemented many new programs. One of the things that came out of the research was that caregivers needed help with access to technology. During the pandemic, there's all kinds of online support groups and different ways to connect with other caregivers. But many of the caregivers we serve have children who are being schooled at home now. And so they may be using the only device they have. So we've been able to give out over 250 tablets to caregivers across the state.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And we actually have more coming. We just found out we got more funding to provide more tablets. So that's been great. The other thing that we did was send out care packages, and this came directly from our surveys. The caregivers just wanted to know that they weren't forgotten and that people still cared. And so we put together care packages that included really self-care items, a book by Brene Brown, a candle, a journal, some tea, all sorts of things to help folks relax, and mailed those out. And we sent over 300 care packages out to caregivers across the state. And we still, if you could see the room I'm in right now, there are 120 boxes sitting here ready to be shipped out to caregivers across the state. So we're still getting money in to send those care packages out. And then perhaps the most popular program that we started since the pandemic is a mini grant program. And this too came out of the research. This is national research was showing this is something that caregivers were needing. And so we're giving out mini grants for what I'm calling non-traditional respite. So with the pandemic, you may not be able to access traditional respite where someone comes in and cares for your loved one, but is there something we can provide you with that will give you a little bit of a break? And so folks have to apply, tell us what item would help give them a break and explain why it would give them a break. And then we are able to fund. Initially, our funding was for up to $500 a person. And then we got a new round of funding once that was exhausted. And so the mini grants are now $300 a person. But folks ask for things like exercise equipment, those meal plan boxes like HelloFresh, people ask for those. We've had a couple of people ask for some hotel stays so that they could just get a night away. So just a variety of things that people feel will give them a break. And so that program has been very popular. And in fact, we're looking for funding so that we can continue that beyond the pandemic. We have a lot of rural areas here in Tennessee, and often caregivers there struggle to find respite providers. And so we see this as just a new way to serve folks who are having trouble accessing respite.
We're just unveiling so many wonderful programs that, goodness, this needs to go nationwide. You need to go nationwide.
Well, we have actually. There's an ARCH, the National Caregiver Network.
Okay.
I've been on many of those calls talking about what we're doing. And so since talking about what we've been doing, we've had many other agencies across the country reach out to us and say, how did you do this? And so we've been helping sort of guide some agencies through how to do what we're doing.
I might have to tap into your knowledge and resource, because
Yes.
there's a few organizations down here in Florida that probably are not aware of this. That I would
love to collaborate with anyone who would like the support.
And then I want to know about these Wellness Wednesdays.
Oh yes. So I implemented Wellness Wednesdays for my staff. I really truly believe in focusing on wellness. And if my staff are well, then they can provide their jobs well. And if they're not well, that impacts their work. And so we spend an hour every Wednesday focusing on staff wellness. And that we rotate. So every other week, we're doing a reading. Right now, we're reading The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. And so we read a chapter every other week. And then the weeks in between, we do some or other sort of activity. So before the pandemic, we went and did yoga, things like that. Now we are all working remotely and not having meetings together. So we're doing other activities. Last week, we listened to a TED Talk on how to shut down after hours when you're working from home. Because like many other people, I'm sure, when your work is in your home, it's there 24/7. And so it's really hard to stop at the end of the day. And that was one of the things that was coming up in Wellness Wednesdays for our staff is I'm working so much more than I did before because it's there. And I feel like I need to keep going. And so we focused on how can we stop doing that?
Because I think I need to find that
yes.
TED Talk.
I will send you the link.
Very good. You're quite the leader.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I sense that from reading your bio, and then after talking to you today, it's like, oh goodness, what a leader! You're a servant leader.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I think, Megan, this is a great time for us to take our break, and as you know, I'm putting all of our guests on a 30 and 30 podcast. We want to know a fun fact about you when we return.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, so put your thinking cap on.
Okay.
Okay, you're listening to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. We'll be right back.
Tomorrow on Healing Ties 2.0.
During the best of times, caregiving is hard. And one of the things that caregivers have always, unfortunately, had a tendency to do is isolate. Quit reaching out for help, quit going out to dinner or to lunch with their friends and other family members. So here we are at a time in 2020 when caregivers are being told to socially distance, essentially isolate, essentially stay home and take care of your loved one. No, you can't go do all the things that you love doing anymore because you may put yourself at risk. You may put your loved one that you're caring for at risk. So what's a caregiver to do? And I will tell you, it has been an incredible strain on caregivers. I'd like to talk about some ways that caregivers can defeat some of that stress, conquer some of that stress, and stay emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically healthy. This is Tula Wooten with Tula's Tips for Caregivers. I'm inviting you to listen to our conversation. It's me and Chris McKellen from Healing Ties, and we are going to be talking about caregiving, COVID, and the holidays. Oh my. Please join us as we discuss some of these challenging times.
Join us tomorrow and every day in November for 30 shows in 30 days. Healing Ties 2.0. Available at thewholecarenetwork.com/Healing Ties and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm continuing my delightful conversation with Dr. Megan Schwalm from the Tennessee Respite Coalition. And I think I want to move to Tennessee because they're providing respite, and Megan's so wonderful that
Thank you.
Maybe there's a future here. So, in Tennessee to do podcasts. So, but Megan, I'm putting you on the spot. What we want to know, that one fun fact about you that I don't know, and I know all of our listeners want to know.
I used to play roller derby.
Oh my goodness gracious, St. Ignatius. I loved roller derby. Joni West.
Yes.
I'm dating myself. Well, please, more. We need details.
So I played roller derby for a couple of years back in Iowa. My derby name was Polly Slamma. I'm a big fan of the Pollyanna movie. So Polly Slamma. And we traveled around the state and the country playing roller derby.
That is exciting. Roller derby.
Yep.
Wow. I remember as a kid going to the Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis and watching the roller derby. And on Saturday nights, there was always the roller derby, the men and the women. I haven't seen roller derby in ages, but
roller derby's a little bit different now.
Yeah.
Roller derby back then was more like the WWF, like staged fighting and those sorts of things. And now there's none of that staged fighting. It's all real.
It's all real.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be on your team then, because I'm very passive. So. I got to ask you, how did you get into roller derby? What was? Did you like to skate, or what was?
I loved skating as a kid. We every weekend would spend Friday night at the roller skating rink, and so really loved skating. And was looking for an activity to do for my own self-care. I was working in nonprofit work and finishing a PhD and just needed something to decompress. And this roller derby team was starting and just felt right up my alley.
Stress reduction. What? Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll bring my rollerblades when I come to Nashville.
Yes, do it.
Goodness. Well, Megan, we just have a couple of minutes left in the show. You have an open invitation to be on Healing Ties podcast. And actually, I think you need a podcast of your own on the Whole Care Network.
I've heard that.
Message to you and your organization have a message to share that will impact, you're impacting caregivers in Tennessee. This would impact caregivers all across the nation. So, but we could certainly have to talk about that, but let all of our listeners know how they can be in touch with you and find more information about your program.
Sure. Our website is tnrespite.org. You could reach me via email, and it's MEGAN.SCHWALM@tnrespite.org. And then we have social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So just Google the Tennessee Respite Coalition.
And Megan, with the stories you share and the work that you do, you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you enough for joining me today. What a delight this conversation has been.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, unfortunately, that does it for this episode of Healing Ties. I could go on for hours. I have more roller derby questions too. But as you know, I'm your host, Christopher McClellan, the Bowtie Guy. I've created a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories, resources, and being with awesome people like Dr. Megan Schwalm. Healing Ties is produced in the posh studios of Odd Box Production in downtown St. Louis, Missouri, and is part of the Whole Care Network. Check out our soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website, and be sure to meet Bo. And subscribe to Healing Ties wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties, tomorrow, as we continue with our 30 podcasts in 30 days to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye for now.
This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen.